When I first started watching and taking part in debates about Christianity, I thought I would end up with clear answers. I expected that if someone showed strong evidence for or against something in the Bible, that would settle the question. But over time, I realized that it doesn't really work that way. Christianity, at least the way it's often defended in debates, has a way of adjusting itself whenever a piece of evidence seems to challenge it, and that realization changed how I see the whole religion. The main thing I learned is that the meaning of the Bible verses is never fixed. Whenever someone points out a verse that doesn't line up with science or history, the meaning seems to shift. It becomes something different, something new that fits better with what we already know today. But then, when new information appears that challenges the new interpretation, the meaning gets shifted again. It becomes a moving target. I noticed this so many times that I started to see a pattern. No matter what evidence comes forward, Christianity always seems to be able to reshape its explanations so it never has to admit being wrong. That might sound like a clever survival tactic for a belief system, but it also means it can't really be tested. If something changes its meaning every time it's questioned, then how can you even know what's true or false? If the same verse means one thing now, and in a few hundred years, people decide it means something completely different, how do we ever know what the Bible was actually trying to say? This question led me to a pretty strong conclusion. If a system of belief keeps changing to avoid being proven wrong, then it isn't trustworthy. Let's say someone claims the Bible predicted a historical event. If the predicted event doesn't line up with what really happened, people might say, "Oh, you're misunderstanding the verse. It wasn't talking about that event, it was metaphorical." That's a convenient escape. But what if the same verse is brought up later to support another claim? Suddenly, it's taken literally again. It feels like whatever interpretation helps protect the religion in that moment is the one people reach for. That's not honesty, that's flexibility for the sake of self-preservation. Because of this, I started thinking that trying to refute the Bible directly is a waste of time. There's no final version of its meaning. It's like trying to pin down a cloud. Every time someone disproves an idea with evidence, new interpretations appear that make the original claim seem untouched. So what can you actually prove or disprove if the definition keeps shifting? Nothing really sticks. And that made me question not only the logic behind Christianity, but also the value of debating it endlessly. When I think about faith, I imagine it should give someone peace, a sense of direction, or hope in difficult times. I understand why people want to believe. It feels good to have a purpose and to think someone is looking out for you. If Christianity stayed as a personal source of peace, maybe I'd feel differently about it. I might even see some value in it for people who need stability in their lives. But the problem begins when it reaches beyond personal peace and starts trying to control others. Christianity doesn't just involve private beliefs, it tells people how to live, what's right or wrong, and even what laws should exist in society. I've seen how deeply it can affect public decisions. It can shape who gets rights, who's seen as moral, and who isn't. When a religion starts to dictate how other people can or cannot live their lives, that's when belief stops being a choice and starts being control. That kind of control doesn't sit right with me. I think people should decide how to live based on evidence and compassion, not based on something that can keep changing its meaning whenever it's challenged. That's one reason I started to see the value in moral philosophies that come from science instead of religion. Science doesn't claim to be perfect or unchanging, it adjusts when new evidence appears, but it doesn't twist meanings to protect itself. It looks for the truth by testing, revising, and learning openly. If you build your moral views on what science shows about human nature, emotions, and well-being, you can make moral decisions that actually reflect how people really live and feel. Take the example of being gay. Science has shown that sexuality isn't a simple matter of choice. People don't wake up one day and decide who to be attracted to. It comes from how they're wired, influenced by biology and early experiences. If that's true, then it doesn't make sense to judge or hate someone for it. You wouldn't blame someone for being left-handed or for them having brown eyes. Those are just parts of who they are, so why would you treat being gay any differently? Yet in Christianity, there are verses that some people say condemn homosexuality. Over time, some Christians have tried to reinterpret these verses differently, saying they were actually about other issues like temple practices or sexual violence. Others still insist they mean being gay is wrong, no matter what. The result is confusion, not clarity. The verse can mean whatever people want it to mean, depending on their current beliefs. And that's another case where the meaning shifts to fit modern times, and it shows again why I have trouble trusting it as a foundation for morality. Science, on the other hand, doesn't tell us what we want to hear. It tells us what's supported by evidence. It also allows correction. If a claim turns out to be false, the scientific community changes its conclusion and documents why. There's a kind of honesty in that process. It's not controlled by authority or tradition. It's shaped by testing, by reason, and by curiosity. I think morality should work the same way. If our understanding of human suffering or happiness changes based on real data, our moral system should evolve with it, not resist it. Another thing I noticed from debates is how often emotion replaces reason when faith is challenged. When someone brings up contradictions in the Bible, it's rare to see believers seriously rethinking their position. Instead, they often say the problem lies in human understanding, not in the scripture itself. That way, the text always stays perfect, and any issue becomes the fault of humans for not understanding God's plan. It's a neat way to avoid doubt, but it means truth no longer depends on reality. It depends on your willingness to believe whatever it takes to protect the system. After seeing this pattern again and again, I began thinking less about whether Christianity is true and more about what it does. It unites some communities and gives comfort, but it also divides people over things like gender, sexuality, and science. It tells people that faith is more important than evidence, which can lead to justifying almost anything as long as you believe hard enough. To me, that's dangerous. A belief system that can't admit error encourages arrogance instead of humility. I'd still agree that peace and direction are things everyone should seek. If religion genuinely gives someone comfort without harming others or forcing control, it's not my business to take that away. But when belief crosses the line and starts limiting freedom, spreading falsehoods, or branding people as sinners for being who they are, it becomes society's problem. No moral system should rest on texts that can be endlessly rephrased to fit the current generation's justifications. A moral system should rest on understanding evidence and empathy. That's why I think we need a way of living and judging right from wrong that doesn't depend on rewriting ancient verses. Instead of building our values around scriptures, we should build them around knowledge that grows, things proven through careful observation, research, and reflection. We already know through psychology and neuroscience that compassion, cooperation, and fairness help humans thrive. Science gives us the tools to understand why certain actions bring harm or well-being, and that understanding can guide morality better than faith interpretations that shift with time. In the end, what I learned from all those Christianity debates wasn't about who won or who lost. It was about realizing the kind of foundation I want for truth. Christianity can be comforting, but its flexibility with meaning makes it unreliable when it comes to proving or disproving anything. It may feel timeless, but only because it changes constantly to fit modern thought. That's not the same thing as being true. Truth should stand even when no one agrees with it, and falsehood should fall when the evidence is clear. Religion, by its nature, protects belief more than truth. So when people ask me what I believe, I tell them this. I believe in following what we can test, question, and learn from, not because I want to rebel against religion, but because I want to understand the world without needing to twist meaning to fit evidence. That's what real honesty looks like to me, and that's what I've learned. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.